So now we come to chapter 3, which we already covered the first part, which covers Paul's stewardship. Now, the second part is a second prayer in the book of Ephesians. And this is where everything becomes really intimate and personal. The first prayer in Ephesians is for vision, that our eyes would be opened so that we would know what God is doing and what we are called to and the greatness of the power of resurrection that God is working towards us. But the second prayer is a prayer for experience. It's where the vision that we see becomes our reality. There probably is no sadder experience or more heartbreaking thing than to see a vision but not have the experience. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. But this was the experience of Old Testament saints. If you think about Abraham, he waited so long for the seed to come after being shown a clear vision that his seed would be multiplied as the sands and as the stars. To know that the life you live is not according to what you've seen can really make you feel like something's wrong, but we have to live by faith and patience in God's promise. However, the prayer for experience in this chapter really does call for realities that can become immediately and intimately available to us as believers. So all the vision in chapters 1 and 2 lead to one word: building. The church is being built. We can see this clearly in the last part of chapter 2, where Paul says that we are being built together to become a habitation of God through Spirit. There are two major aspects of the church revealed in Ephesians: the body, which is the fullness of Christ, and the building, which is the dwelling or the habitation of God. Both the body and the building are produced by being built. If we want to know what God is doing in this age, He's building up the church. Possibly the greatest prophecy in the New Testament is in Matthew 16, where Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it." This is the only time the word church is used in the Gospels. This is because it's related to the hidden mystery that was not really revealed until after Christ resurrected. However, this word is used a lot throughout the epistles and is really the focus of the epistles. In the epistles, the focus is not on the individual Christian life, but on the church that Christ is building. And in spite of all the troubles that can be seen with the naked eye in the churches, the Lord is still building His church. And not only did Jesus say that He would build His church, He said the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. This implies spiritual warfare. The first mention of the church is in the context of spiritual warfare. In the Old Testament, everything is a picture of what we experience today in reality. It's like God built a model before He began to build the real thing. The model for building in the Old Testament was the temple, which was built of literal stones with physical hands. And of course, the reality is the church, made up of Christ as the cornerstone and the members, who Peter calls living stones. It's not built by hands, but by the power of God in resurrection towards the church. However, in the case of the Old Testament model and in the New Testament reality, the enemy is fighting. In the Old Testament, we said last message, the war was over the building of the temple. Satan wants to stop God from being manifested in the temple, so he attacked the Israelites with distraction, especially in the form of idols from the nations, because he knew if he could draw them away to worship the demons of the nations, it wouldn't just insult God, but it would cause God's people to disregard the temple. From the time God rescued Israel from Egypt to the time He brought them into the good land, the goal was the temple. Then it took a long time for God to be able to get everything into the right position so the temple could be built. Finally, when Solomon built the temple and dedicated it, God's presence filled it. As we said, this is the peak of the Old Testament. Then there's a long line of kings, and everybody knows that many of these kings were failures, and we talk about how this is how Israel failed God. However, the point is that the enemy was actually working through these failures to get the kings to set up idols and draw people away to worship foreign gods and disregard the temple. And God was able to raise up a few prophets and kings that could bring the focus back, but in the end, God did have to judge His people and bring them into captivity in Babylon, and the temple was destroyed and dismantled. This is the great tragedy of the Old Testament. After 70 years, though, God was able to stir up some of his people to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild, and they did so through much conflict. The glory of the rebuilt temple was nothing like the glory in Solomon's day. Now these temples were a picture and a model, and God was by no means thwarted, but his eyes were already really on the new temple which would be built, consisting of Christ and the church, which was a mystery not yet revealed. Yet how desperately the enemy fought, and through this fighting we can see what spiritual warfare is all about.